Welcome to our deep dive today. It's one that I think you're going to find particularly fascinating. We're going to be looking at the Sacred Heart. And as someone who's devoted to this devotion, I have a feeling you're going to love this journey we're about to take. Our main source for this deep dive is Revelations of the Sacred Heart. It's a collection of writings and documents about Blessed Margaret Mary Alacoque, the visitation order, and the origins of this whole devotion to the Sacred Heart and really how it spread. I think you're going to find Margaret Mary's story absolutely captivating, and it's amazing to see how the devotion to the Sacred Heart has impacted history. So our mission today is to uncover the story behind the Sacred Heart and really, look for those practical takeaways that you can glean from it today.
It's a story that takes us back to 17th century France, a time when the Catholic Church was going through some really, turbulent times, facing a lot of challenges.
Yeah, and it's that context that makes the emergence of the Sacred Heart even more profound. We can't really get it without understanding, the world it was born into. So, paint a picture for us. What was going on within the church back then?
Well, imagine a church dealing with, the rise of Protestantism. This was a movement that challenged traditional Catholic teachings and, it emphasized, individual interpretation of the Bible.
Yeah.
And it led to a lot of theological debate and division.
It sounds like a lot of turmoil within Christianity at the time.
And on top of that, within the Catholic Church itself, there was this movement called Jansenism. It had this really, severe view of human nature, all about sinfulness, and it really downplayed God's mercy, making salvation seem almost, impossible.
So it sounds like people were really yearning for, a tangible experience of God's love, a reminder that he is merciful, especially with all this going on. It reminds me of Saint Therese of Lisieux, the Carmelite nun. She wrote, I will spend my heaven doing good on earth, which shows that same desire to bring God's love into a world that really needed it. Do you think the Sacred Heart arose in, a similar way?
Absolutely. The Sacred Heart offered that beacon of hope, that reassurance of God's love. It was such a powerful, powerful antidote to these spiritual anxieties of the time. I mean, this devotion with its emphasis on Jesus' heart, it became the symbol of his divine love and mercy.
It's amazing that this devotion, which has touched so many lives, came from, a young nun, Margaret Mary Alacoque. What was her early life like? What led her to the Sacred Heart?
From her childhood, Margaret Mary was deeply, deeply pious. She was so aware of sin that even the thought of possibly displeasing God, that was enough to stop her.
I've heard that story about her. The one where she refused to dance at a carnival as a child because she saw it as an offense to God. It says a lot about her reverence, even as a young girl. But what led her to the visitation order? I mean, was it a natural step from her childhood, piety?
Oh, absolutely. Her early experiences, they fueled this longing for a life devoted to God. And that led her to the visitation order at Paris-Limonial. It was a community known for its focus on, contemplation and devotion to the Eucharist and the cross.
So, the perfect environment for her to grow spiritually. But I'm also curious about, the people who surrounded her there, who influenced her. Did they immediately support her, or was there skepticism about her experiences?
Well, the convent definitely was supportive, but her path, it wasn't without its challenges. Margaret Mary was incredibly devout during her novitiate, and she had these extraordinary visions, communications with Jesus, but not everyone understood, even within the convent. Some doubted her, questioned her visions,
It must have been tough, to handle those doubts while staying true to what she'd experienced. So tell us more about these visions. How did they shape her understanding of the Sacred Heart?
Well, they weren't just, fleeting glimpses. They were profound, real revelations. They showed just how deep Jesus' love for humanity was and how much he desired this special devotion to his Sacred Heart.
Wow. So a direct call from Jesus
Yeah.
to, connect with him more deeply and personally. Our listener who's already devoted to the Sacred Heart must be hanging on every word. Can you walk us through those revelations? What did Jesus tell Margaret Mary about his Sacred Heart?
It all began with, a vision, really. It showed the immense love Jesus had for everyone, all of humanity. He revealed his heart to Margaret Mary, and it was this heart, blaze with love but crowned with thorns and pierced by a lance. It was like a powerful symbol of the pain he endured for us, for our redemption.
It's like a visual testament to his sacrifice and his desire for, love from us in return.
Exactly. It wasn't just about like knowing his love. It was about going deeper, fostering a closer relationship with him, seeing his Sacred Heart as a refuge, a source of grace, especially for those who felt lost.
So it wasn't just a concept, it was a lifeline,
Mm.
a source of comfort,
Hmm.
especially with all the uncertainty in the world back then. This must have really resonated with Margaret Mary, given her own challenges.
It did. And it was in another revelation that Jesus revealed, well, 12 specific promises to those who would embrace this devotion. These promises offered not only spiritual comfort, but like tangible blessings, peace in families, strength during tough times, and even a happy death.
So not just abstract ideas, but real, tangible ways that the Sacred Heart could change lives. That's incredible. But Margaret Mary's journey wasn't easy, was it? I mean, what kind of pushback did she get when she tried to share these revelations?
Well, imagine the reaction she got,
Yeah.
talking about visions of a flaming heart with thorns pierced. People were skeptical, even within the church. It took a lot of faith and perseverance for her to keep advocating for the Sacred Heart.
It really makes you think about the courage it takes to, stick to your calling,
Hmm.
even when people doubt you. Who supported her during those tough times? Did anyone in the church, believe her?
Her spiritual director did. Father de la Colombière, he was a Jesuit priest, very wise and discerning. He believed her visions were real and gave her the guidance she needed, encouraged her to keep going despite the skepticism.
So their relationship was crucial in helping her through those early years, and ultimately helped the Sacred Heart devotion to become accepted.
Mm.
It shows how important spiritual direction is, especially when you're going through something so powerful spiritually.
Absolutely. And it's amazing to see how this devotion, even though it started so small, it took root and spread, changing people's lives.
Yeah, it really did take root, and it's still so strong today.
Mm.
It shows just how powerful God's love is, how it can, last through the ages. And speaking of its power, I think it's time we talk about the, practical side of this devotion. As someone devoted to the Sacred Heart, I'm sure you're wondering how to really, live it out for sure. I think lots of Catholics, devout Catholics, they're drawn to the Sacred Heart because it's not just a concept. It has the potential to change your everyday life.
Yeah.
So for those listening who want that deeper connection, what can they do? How can they make it real?
Well, there are some beautiful practices that have come out of this devotion. Each one offers a unique way to connect with the love of the Sacred Heart. And one that comes to mind right away is the First Friday devotion.
Oh, yeah. The first Fridays, I've always been curious about that. What's so special about it? How does it connect us to the Sacred Heart?
It's all about receiving communion on 9 First Fridays in a row. 9 months in a row, really. It's like an act of dedication to the Sacred Heart, a way of, aligning yourself with his love. Each First Friday becomes this reminder of his sacrifice and a chance to grow closer to him.
So it makes the Sacred Heart a part of your life,
Hmm.
not just something you think about every now and then. But what else can we do on those first Fridays besides communion? Are there prayers or reflections that help us connect even more?
A lot of Catholics incorporate the Litany of the Sacred Heart. It lists out all the virtues and attributes of the Sacred Heart. It's a beautiful way to contemplate his love and mercy. Some people also spend time in adoration, before the Blessed Sacrament. That allows for a much deeper experience with Jesus' presence in the Eucharist.
It's like a tapestry,
Yep.
woven with prayer and reflection. It helps us to really immerse ourselves in the Sacred Heart's love. And what about the Holy Hour? That's another devotion connected to the Sacred Heart. How does spending that hour help us grow closer to Jesus?
It's about spending an hour in prayer and meditation, focusing on the Sacred Heart, just surrendering all your worries and anxieties to Jesus. You can read scriptures about the Sacred Heart, reflect on his passion, or just, be present with him. Let his love and grace fill you up.
Wow, it sounds so peaceful, like a sanctuary in our crazy lives. To just be with Jesus and let his love wash over us. So many people find strength and peace in the Sacred Heart, especially with everything going on in the world today. It's a reminder that no matter what, Jesus' love is always there. But besides First Fridays and the Holy Hour, is there something else, for someone who really wants to commit to this devotion fully?
Yes, absolutely. For those who are ready to take that next step, there's consecration to the Sacred Heart. It's a formal act of surrendering yourself completely. Your will, your desires, your whole life. You're giving it all to Jesus' love and care. It's like saying, Jesus, I'm all yours. Guide my life with your love.
Consecration, it's like making your relationship with the Sacred Heart official, letting you be the center of your life. Are there specific prayers for that or rituals?
There are some formal prayers, but the real key is the state of your heart. It's a choice you make. to live each day in union with the Sacred Heart, letting his love guide everything you do. This could mean offering your prayers, your work, even your joys and struggles to Jesus every day, seeking his guidance when you have to make decisions, and trying to, be like him in your love and mercy towards others.
It's amazing how this devotion goes beyond just, personal prayer. It changes how we live in the world. It's not just about saying prayers in private. It's about letting the love of the Sacred Heart influence our relationships, our work, how we interact with everyone.
Exactly. You become a vessel of that love, and it shines outwards and touches everyone around you. Even simple acts of kindness, compassion, forgiveness, they all become part of that divine love, like ripples spreading out from your heart. It changes you and it changes everyone you touch.
It reminds me of that image of Jesus showing his Sacred Heart to Margaret Mary. He wasn't just, making a gesture. He was offering a way to live, a way to change ourselves and the world with his love. But, some people struggle with the imagery of the Sacred Heart. It can seem a little graphic, even disturbing to some. How can we approach this part of the devotion with sensitivity, but without losing its powerful message?
You're right. It's a good point. We have to remember that the imagery, even though it's striking, it has a purpose. The thorns, the wound, the flames, they all represent how deep Jesus' love is. He chose to suffer and die because he loves us that much. It's not meant to be scary or morbid, but a profound expression of his love, love that never wavers.
It shows us that real love means sacrifice, being willing to give yourself up for someone else. And with Jesus, he gave the ultimate sacrifice, his life for our salvation. And that self-giving love, that's the heart of the Sacred Heart devotion.
Yes, exactly. And when we reflect on these images, it encourages us to give that love back, to offer our hearts to Jesus in return, and let his love change us from the inside out.
It's a powerful exchange. Love and surrender going both ways. And the Sacred Heart isn't just about suffering. It's about triumph, too. Those flames, they represent Jesus' burning love, the kind that conquers sin and death. It's a reminder that even in the darkest times, love wins.
It definitely is. The Sacred Heart is a symbol of hope. It reminds us that even in our worst moments, we're never alone. Jesus' love is constant. It's always there, offering us peace, strength, and the promise of eternal life.
I wonder if Margaret Mary found comfort in the image of the Sacred Heart, especially when she was facing doubt and resistance. It must have given her strength and reminded her of the truth and the power of what she was sharing.
I bet it did. It's often when we're going through our hardest times that we experience God's love most deeply. The Sacred Heart, with both its suffering and its triumph, it's a tangible reminder of that love, that reassurance that even in the dark times, we're not alone.
It makes you realize that this devotion, it's not just about, sentimental feelings. It's about facing the hard parts of faith, the doubts and fears, and finding peace in Jesus' constant love. It's a journey that challenges us to grow, to understand God's love more and more, and to let that love change us from the inside out.
And when we let ourselves be transformed by that love, we naturally start to share it with others. It becomes less about, what we gain and more about joining Jesus in his mission, bringing his love and mercy to the world.
That brings up a good point. We talked about how the Sacred Heart helps us personally, the peace, the strength, the comfort. But how does it prepare us to deal with the problems in the world around us? How do we take this love from the Sacred Heart and make it a force for good in our families, our communities, even in society as a whole?
That's a great question. It gets to the heart of what it means to truly live this devotion. It's not just about our own transformation. It's about becoming, agents of change, bringing the love and mercy of the Sacred Heart everywhere we go.
So it's not about hiding away in our private devotions. It's about going out into the world, armed with the love and compassion we found in the Sacred Heart. And that reminds me of those 12 promises we talked about earlier. They offer personal blessings, but they also show how powerful this devotion can be in our relationships, our families, our communities.
Exactly. Those promises, they touch on things like peace and families, protection from evil, and just an abundance of blessings. They show us that this devotion, it doesn't just affect us personally, it ripples outward and touches everyone around us.
It's a reminder that the Sacred Heart is more than just practices or a pretty picture. It's a way of life. It's about becoming more like Christ, reflecting his love and mercy in everything we do. It's amazing to think about it. This devotion, it started with just one nun back in the 17th century in France. And now it's touched so many lives in the church. It still gives people comfort and guidance even today.
It really shows you, doesn't it, the power of God's love. It goes beyond time and place. And it shows how strong Margaret Mary was. She shared this message of the Sacred Heart, even when people doubted her and opposed her.
Her life, It's like a reflection of the message itself,
Yeah.
full of challenges but also overflowing with God's love.
And what's really striking is that it wasn't about her, you know? She didn't want fame or anything like that. All she wanted was for the Sacred Heart to be honored and for its love to change lives.
She was so humble, putting everyone else first, just like Jesus did.
Yes, exactly. And that's a lesson for us too. The Sacred Heart isn't just about our own private devotion. It's a call to bring that love out into the world, to be like, shining examples of that love in our families, communities, everywhere.
So how do we do that? How do we take this devotion beyond the walls of our churches and homes? How do we, as Catholics who love the Sacred Heart, actually become, living examples of that love in our everyday lives?
Well, it starts with that personal relationship with the Sacred Heart. The practices we talked about, the first Fridays, the Holy Hour, consecration. But it goes deeper than that. It's about letting that love guide everything we do, how we treat other people.
So we take that love and compassion we've received from the Sacred Heart and let it shape how we talk, how we act, how we react to all the things that happen every day.
Exactly. Every act of kindness, every time we show compassion or forgive someone, that becomes like a way of sharing that divine love. It's like ripples, starting in your heart and spreading out, changing your life and the lives of the people you meet.
It's amazing to think that something so small, a smile, a kind word, helping someone out, those things can be like reflections of the Sacred Heart, little ways of showing God's love in the world.
And when we try to really live this devotion, we become part of Jesus's mission. We become instruments of his healing and mercy. We start to see the world through his eyes with love. We see the dignity in every single person, no matter who they are, what they believe, or what they're going through.
Well, as we wrap up our deep dive today, I just feel this sense of awe. The Sacred Heart is so powerful and beautiful. It's not just a symbol. It's like a fountain of God's love, It's a source of strength, comfort, and change. It's touched so many lives throughout history, and it still offers hope and healing to our world today.
And for you, dear listener, someone who already has this devotion to the Sacred Heart, let this be a reminder of the incredible gift you have in your heart. It's a gift that you're meant to share and live out every day. May the love of the Sacred Heart always guide you, strengthen you, and inspire you to be a light of his mercy and compassion in the world.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. May the Sacred Heart always be a source of inspiration and change in your life and in the lives of everyone you meet.